So it's really true that Pedro has done something with Elena that's extraordinary. I mean, we have a research focus, and I'll be talking about our community and the research focus we have. But at the same time, it's sort of such a wonderful thing to bring this focus into the area of patient care and so on, where it's so obvious that there's such high need and such high potential. So Pedro, this was Pedro's idea. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it was Elena's idea too. I mean, she's remarkable as well. But I mean, the entire group really, you deserve every honor. It's really quite wonderful, and wonderful for our field as well as for society. So have we embarrassed you enough? Okay. I can do some more. Okay. So what I'd like to do, we have a mixed group here. We have our OUI people who know a lot about this field, and then we have some people who are, are drawn by the patient innovation thing and perhaps know less about the field. So I'll try to thread the needle here and talk about innovation by individual users and citizens and make the distinction between the two. So as Carlos said, we have Schumpeter there. And we have about, almost 100 years now of focus on producers, really initiated and driven by early work by Schumpeter. So the idea of that was, and Schumpeter initially said, that basically producers are the ones who move society forward, who innovate. And the logic of that was pretty clear. Producers can serve a lot of customers, therefore producers can presumably spend more, therefore producers can make better innovations than can users. Now, in the time of our community, there's something rather awkward began to become visible, which is, and this is now focusing on individual users, colleagues of mine, Jeroen de Jong and Steve Flowers and Susumu Ogawa, worked together to actually start to measure the amount of consumer innovation in society. Not producers. Consumers, according to Schumpeter, were simply the absorbers of what innovations were developed by producers. So we studied these in different countries, and the first one was the UK. And what you see there is that 6.1% of the population actually has created or modified a product to make it better for themselves within the last 3 years. Now, 6.1% of the population in the UK is 2.9 million people. In the UK, there are only 22,000 R&D people making innovations for consumers. So the ratio of innovating citizens to producer innovators is over 100 to 1. And yet, because of our focus on the producer, no one has measured this innovation before this community began to do it. So it's really quite a remarkable thing. What we are trying to do as a community is understand this hidden phenomenon. Nobody knew it existed. Nobody measured it. Because nobody measured it, it didn't exist as far as scholars were concerned, as far as policymakers were concerned. Huge implications of that, because things like intellectual property law is based on the needs of producers, not of users. Well, so for those of you who are now not of our community who know lots of examples, I'll give you a couple of examples. Here's a small one. And it's a very reasonable idea, don't you think? Here's a man. He's built basically a motor scooter into his suitcase. Why should you carry your suitcase? We are so proud of the fact that our suitcase has wheels, but my goodness, it can carry you. Now, that's a single small innovation, and many people sort of think of innovation as sort of little trivial hacks. But in fact, somebody here, Dana, you're here somewhere, I think, has demonstrated along with Scott, and she'll be talking later, that much more serious innovations are done by users all the time. Many of the people who are going to get rewards here are demonstrating that as well. But when you think about it, who has more incentive to solve a problem? A producer controlled by the FDA in some way in medical devices, or users? And so the wonderful thing is that Dana will talk about is how she and colleagues have actually built artificial pancreases to manage their own diabetes, while producers are still saying, you know what, maybe 5 years from now? And so she's a member of something called the Night Scout Group, whose slogan is, "We are not waiting," which is just so totally fabulous, right? Now, we have been in our community talking for a long time about the fact that these people are users, and certainly Dana is a user. She directly needs the innovation that she is creating with Scott and others. But, in fact, we are moving now as a community sort of to consider there are other kinds of incentives and motives that citizen innovators in the household sector engage in beyond simple use. And we as a community sort of have done a lot of work on this. And here are some of the people: Nick Franke, Martin Schreier, Ulrike Kaiser. I designed it myself, effect. Others, I mean, I won't go through the list here. You can see it. But basically, we as a community have been saying, you know what? Here are these individual users we've identified, but there's more going on here than simple use motives. So along with Jeroen de Jong and people who have surveyed in Finland, Jeroen did a cluster analysis. And what you can see here, if you can see it, in fact, is that when you do a cluster analysis, what you find is that these innovating citizens, which include innovating users like Dana, these innovating citizens have other strong motives in addition to the motive of getting something to use for themselves. This is very important for us to understand because there are different ways then to help and motivate people who have different incentives. Now, so what we see on the top left there is users, the ones that we conventionally assumed were the driving motives. But then we have, in this survey, we also have a fraction of household sector people who are trying to be producers. They're trying to start companies. They're innovating as citizens, but they really want to start a company. Then we have helpers on the lower left, and I'll mention that in a minute. We have people who are not in need themselves, but have an altruistic wish to help others. And Ivan Owen will be an example that I'll draw on for that. He too will be here today. He's here today, and he'll be talking as well. And then we have participators, and participators is an enormous one. Participators is people have fun innovating. They're actually enjoying the process. So when Dana gets to work on her artificial pancreas, or when other people get to work like on that suitcase or whatever it might be, they don't go down to their workshop in the basement and say, oh, curses, another day in the coal mine. They're saying, this is fun and I'm going to learn something. It's fabulous. And so what we have is a series of motivations there, all of which can drive this process we're calling innovation by citizens, and all of which has a really interesting characteristic. Namely, it is self-rewarding. So let me create a contrast here. I showed you the image of Schumpeter's linear innovation model on the bottom there. It starts with market research, R&D, production, market diffusion. It's all about profit. The employees are paid, and in the end, the way they make their money back is that they sell the innovations. It's all about what are called compensated transactions. Now, if we look at citizen innovators, we can make a really interesting distinction. We can say that citizen innovations are self-rewarded. In other words, if we look back at that list of innovations, or let me go here, if we look at the innovation incentives, personal use of my innovation is a self-reward. Nobody has to pay me. Helping others, altruism, the warm glow, is a self-reward. Nobody has to give me some transaction in exchange. Having fun in developing it, again, a self-reward. Learning from developing it, again, a self-reward. The only transaction in these kinds of household sector innovators that has to do with selling it is a small motive on average. But as I say, it breaks out here so that we end up with some producer innovators, namely they are the people who are not self-rewarding, but all the rest are self-rewarding. Now, that's quite remarkable, because what that means is if we leave out the people, put the people, the individuals who are going to be producers, they are motivated by selling something, in the bottom column, along with other producers and startups and firms, what we have left on the top is people, again, who are self-rewarded. That's most of these millions and tens of millions of people. So here they are. They're starting it because they want it for themselves or because they're having fun developing it. They collaboratively improve it. They reveal it. They don't have to hide it. They don't have to protect it to sell it. So they reveal it, and other people can improve it, therefore. And then at the end, it can diffuse for free. Now, this is a fabulously strong mechanism. Two things about it. It's a paradigm that's different than the Schumpeterian paradigm because the Schumpeterian paradigm is about profit. This thing is not about profit, and therefore it doesn't enter into any of the economic statistics. So when we draw this in by measuring it, even though it does not appear in the economic statistics, we can start to see how it interacts and how it affects us all in terms of social welfare and what we can do to improve it. Now, on a day or two from now, Alfonso Gambardella, who has modeled with me and Christina Roche, will talk about the fact that we need to give incentives. In fact, producers do give incentives to citizen innovators because what do citizen innovators do? They innovate for themselves, but they also freely reveal designs that the producer can profit from. So, an example of someone in this area, and Ivan, you gave me permission to use you as an example, and you don't look pained yet, so I'm very honored. He's holding his head, but that's not pain, ladies and gentlemen. That's not pain. So here's Ivan, and he will talk about this later. He was a maker of, an artist, is an artist, and a maker of marionette kinds of things was one of his things, and he built an artificial hand that you can see here, a giant hand that could be used in a marionette or puppet setting. And he was seen by somebody who had lost his hand. And the end result is that they created and diffused a free printed hand that children can have. It is so here is the process they went through. There is his original hand there, that sort of metal one. And there is he looking happy with his fingers in the air like this, hooray. Here is the person from South Africa, the carpenter, who cut off his fingers and sought Ivan's help. And then they go on and they're building this thing, and they're building this thing, and then there's a child that they're building it for as well, you know, whose mother wrote to Ivan and to Richard Van Ass and said, hey, listen, my kid needs a hand like that. Can you make one for him? And so they got engaged with that process, and that kid is named Liam. Then what happened? Well, what happened is something very exciting. It's within the citizen innovation paradigm as I described it. Nobody was paying Ivan. He was doing it out of charity and the happy sense that he got and the fun that he got from doing the work. What happened then was that he set up with others a network of people around the world who could volunteer their 3D printing capability, and he could connect them up with children in the local area who didn't have hands. And the result was that around the world, totally independent of buying and selling, we have a network where children can get these wonderful hands, and now where children who have hands are starting to negotiate with their parents saying, look, Mom and Dad, do I really need 2 hands? Because I'd really like one of those, you know? I mean, that's pretty cool. And that is much better than what used to happen, which is, you know, you're in some way defective kid and other people are concerned about it. Look how happy they look. And that is something that you and your colleagues did. So again, back to the citizen innovation paradigm, what you see here is Ivan is self-rewarded. Nothing appears in the economic statistics about this. And then the enabled network is a peer-to-peer free diffusion system. Now, Andrew Torrance and I have been working on the legal rights of innovators. And one very interesting sort of side note here is that because it's all free, it is not under FDA regulation at all. You can simply do it. So grassroots innovation, for many reasons, can be more powerful and less encumbered than producer innovation. So now, again, the definition of citizen innovation, free of transactions, strong contrast to producer innovation. Now, what about it? Well, it fits the data. Citizens seldom apply for IPRs, and citizens are generally willing to share. Okay? Now, for our community, what's happening is we are understanding this kind of phenomenon, which has never been seen before. There are tens of thousands of scholars working on sort of the producer innovation paradigm. There are very few of us in this room, are most of them, who are building this alternative which will really shake and change economic policy and our society and world, as Carlos mentioned, and Francisco mentioned as well. I mean, we really think here that as a community, we also are doing something that is really very helpful. Now, the modeling part of this, again, I lean heavily, all of us lean on each other. And so Carlos Baldwin was major in the modeling part, as was Alfonso Gambardella and Christina Roche. And what we've learned, and I don't know, Pedro, how much time do I have? Should I stop? What?
4 minutes.
4 minutes.
5 minutes.
3 minutes. I'll very quickly say that the interactions here are interesting. So what we've learned, because we've understood this paradigm and looked at it cleanly and said it involves no interactions in profit terms, what we do is we start to look at it cleanly. We start to see innovations flowing down from that to the producer innovation paradigm. Now, interestingly and sort of horribly from the point of view of understanding the world, the way economic statistics are gathered, the only time that this innovation activity up here is counted is when it hits commercialization. And then it is attributed to the producer. So the point is that you could have this enormous community generating most of the innovations in an industry. They flow down to the industry. The industry, in effect, because of the way the statistics are built, claims it. And the government says, we must be doing something quite wonderful here to build these really innovative firms. Okay? It's not that way. Now, a couple more things very quickly. Again, they supply designs, they can start entrepreneurship companies and so on and move into that area. Fascinatingly enough, companies are so beholden to users and they don't even know it. So basically, every hardware thing that companies build is a piece of a larger system. But some of that system is not economically feasible for companies. Who provides it? Invisibly, the users do. So what we have is companies making, for instance, mountain bikes. Mountain bikes were developed by users first. The manufacturer said, aha, we can adopt these designs, we can build this stuff, that's fabulous. Here's the hardware, here's the bike. But to use this bike, what you need is techniques. You need mountain biking techniques. No company sells those. Those are transferred peer-to-peer. Those of you who mountain bike, I'm certain you never went to Mountain Biking Academy, right? You taught each other. So here is this industry that is making a ton of money, that is really dependent upon this invisible complement created by the users, and it sort of increases the value of what they sell, but the users are not competing for the money in it, so it sort of sucks more value into, again, the producer segment, and then the producer segment claims the credit. So they also compete. I'm going to jump across now and just stop. There's one really, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop. So this is fabulous, and Pedro is saying, no, go on, go on. And I can't tell what others are saying. Stop immediately, stop. All right, so now with respect to what we find, again, is that citizen innovation, when you see a world that has citizen innovation in it, as opposed to the kind of social calculations of welfare we've made looking at producers only, social welfare is increased when citizens are engaged. And therefore, it's a subject matter for policy. Now, so what we see here is that when you have alternatives that you can choose, then that basically you can buy Linux or you can get it for free. It controls the prices. It improves things. I'm going to jump right over to something about Pedro. Now, the whole thing about citizen innovation, the producer innovation paradigm has market failures in it. That's why we have R&D credits. That's why we have intellectual property. People think, oh, these producers are spending their private money and other people are going to take it away from them without patents. And so what we really have to do is invest heavily in patents. This is not about patents at all, but it has also market failures, and social research and also social policy has to adapt to this. So the market failures here in the citizen innovation paradigm are that the users have an incentive to solve their own problem, but the needs of others are externalities for them. They don't get any reward. Because they're giving it away, they don't get any reward for paying attention to others' needs. Here, they don't have an incentive to invest at the level that everybody else would benefit from, because they are really serving their own needs. And finally, in terms of peer-to-peer diffusion, they don't have an incentive to go out there and push and say, as a manufacturer would, look, you have to do this. You have to do this. You know, you got to buy it because I won't make any profit unless you do. Here is the user, and he's saying, well, if you want it, you can have it, but I'm busy. And so you really have to come find it or something, because I can't invest in advertising. So in a wonderful way, what Pedro's thing is doing here, in addition to supporting patient innovation, is it's an experiment in healing these market failures. So when you think about the patient innovation site, what is it doing? He says sharing solutions, improving life. Well, what he's doing is two things. He's trying to generate more diffusion for these people. He's trying to generate and draw in more helpers like Ivan Owen. So basically, when he sets it up fully with Helena and others in the team, what you do is you sort of post, you know, only at the moment, only producers have an incentive to find out what a lot of people want. But if you set up a site where patients can say what they want, then you have collective information. When they broadcast that information, then all these engineering students and so on, and people like Ivan, can work on it to improve it. So basically what he is doing is generating the machinery and demonstrating the machinery that will be the new basis for policies when we understand citizen innovation as part of how innovation as a whole works. So thank you very much.